Hi, and welcome back to H.E.L.P. I'm your host, Greg Roulette, here with Don Pett. And Don, throughout this program, you've shared with us a lot of tactics and a lot of things that we can do in order to create world peace.
Yes.
Now, I want to start this next lesson off by knowing some of these things that we can do. Do we need to know the how and the why to make them work?
An interesting issue that you bring up. We have such an urgent situation to solve this problem that if we tried to learn all the how and whys, it would take such a while to really learn them that meanwhile the bomb will go off.
Right, we'd never get started, yeah.
Yeah, so the issue is, and it's a wonderful question, can we learn when we don't understand why? And the answer is, of course we can, yes. And I'd like to tell you a story that explains that.
Sure.
There's a story of Grasshopper Joe.
Okay.
Grasshopper Joe meets his centipede friend, Daddy Longlegs, and he says, Daddy, he says, I so admire you. And Daddy Longlegs says, really? And he says, how come? He says, well, I look at your rows upon rows of legs, hundreds, it looks 100 at least.
Yeah.
He says, I just can't understand how you so gracefully glide across the floor like that. And for the first time ever, Daddy Longlegs turned around and he looked at all these legs, one after the other, and he fell on his back paralyzed.
Oh my goodness.
As soon as he tried to understand why and how, he couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
When I was in medical school, we had a whole day, a whole hour of lecture on how we walk, heel down, toe off, and so on. And at the end of that lecture, most people had difficulty walking.
Right. Yeah.
When we try to look at things in too much detail, when you go to buy a car, you want to know where the gas and the pedal is and where the key is.
Yeah.
You don't want to know how the engine works particularly, right?
Right, exactly.
And if you want light, you don't want to know the electricity, you want to know. So what I've done so far is to say this is the fastest, quickest, easiest way that we can get where we want to go. But now you're right, we need to come up with it. So part of the rest of the story about the question you asked is, one of my favorite stories was Make Way for Ducklings. In Boston, there's a mother duckling, she has her ducks, her hatchlings, and she has to get them to the water to teach them how to swim, and there's a kind policeman, and that was a prize-winning book, and they finally get there, and the point is, when they get there, the ducklings, they go into the water and they swim. Mm-hmm. They don't know, if you say, you understand the mechanism of swimming?
No.
A mother bird throws their offspring off the mountain and says, you better fly or else.
Figure it out, yeah.
Most of the time they manage.
Yeah.
So the point is we learn by trial and error, and we've been given that by instinct. We know to learn by trial and error. Now let's talk about, just a minute, finish the story, how it applies to humans. Imagine there was a good Samaritan who came to this island, who saw this island, and you can imagine it's an island on Earth, or you can imagine Earth is an island of some larger system.
Yeah.
And he decides he wants to do something good for the people. So he puts electricity in the island, and he puts a refrigerator in every primitive hut. And how long does it take for people to realize what the purpose of the refrigerator is? They say it's just a good storage area, and though they say, gee, my fish that I put there isn't rotten after a day or two.
Right.
Now, it doesn't take them long to learn that. So the Good Samaritan, then he comes along and he says, I'm going to do something else nice. I'm going to put together a go-kart track. I'll give them a little circular track, and I'll put some go-karts there. And they all come out and they wonder, what is this? And they get into these go-karts and they try this and that. Before you know it, they're going around in a circle, they're having fun, they're enjoying themselves. They've learned a little bit more.
Right.
Next comes along, he says, well, they're getting it pretty good, so I'm going to give them a nice automobile. I'll give them a bus, I'll give them a truck, a bulldozer, and see what they do with it. So it doesn't take long. They figure out what the bulldozer does. They make roads. And now they can travel. They have a Ferrari. They're having fun with a Ferrari, and they're using the bus to get what they want to do. And so this is all coming along very nicely. Then he says, well, why not give them an airplane? So it's a little harder with an airplane. You know how the Wright brothers, they were very unique people. They made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
But they learned how to fly. And next he says, well, I keep going. I'll give them a Superline. I'll give them a 747. And now something is a little different. And what's different? A couple people just can't learn by trial and error anymore. All this time, they had this instinctive ability. They knew how to do things by trial, just like the duckling, and just like Daddy Longlegs. And only when he started looking at things. So now they have to begin to talk to one another. They have to work in cooperation. They have to get together and work together. But they managed to do that, and they managed to get the plane off the ground. And then he keeps on going, and he says, I'm going to give him an intercontinental ballistic missile, and I think I'll give him the secret of the power of the sun. Mm-hmm. Now what's going to happen? You begin to get the idea? Now we have this power. Can any one person, can any one tribe, can any one tribe handle it?
Right.
We have to begin to start working together. So we learn from, just by observation, that we've been given already. As we said, the first cell was given the ability to have an energy factor, giving the ability to multiply, given the ability to direct its energy. So we've already been given a lot, but there's certain things we're not given, and that's what we need to recognize. So we can learn by trial and error up to a certain point. We can learn everything that I've said to you by trial and error, and we can learn it very rapidly.
Yeah.
Just like you can learn how long does it take to learn the refrigerator? When you get your new car, how long does it take to use it?
Right, instantly, yeah.
But now we've got a situation that's very different. So we need to understand something about our history and where we're going from here. So that was a story that I'm kind of fond of. I call it the story of the Good Samaritan, or the Grasshopper Joe story. Now, but we do need to learn something about our history, because we said that if you go from our past to our present and we have an accurate understanding, we can predict our future.
Right.
So that's what we want to understand now a little bit more. So I'm going to discuss a couple areas about our evolutionary history in different areas. And they're all very informative and get us in touch with our power.
Definitely. And the first one we're going to jump into is
Education. We're going to start with education. How do we progress? We said we are a work in progress. How do we develop our ability to learn to learn? Well, we first learn by pre-engineering. We said that first cell was already given certain
instructions. Yeah.
You were already indoctrinated, weren't you, when you were born?
Right.
We said you've got various instincts. You know how to eat, you know how to cry, you know how to poop.
Right.
You know, you do all these things. You didn't learn those things.
It was just instinctual. Yeah.
You've actually been programmed over 1 billion years or more.
Right.
To do it. It didn't happen suddenly.
Yeah.
but you got all this. You started off with a lot.
Yeah.
And then when you were born, you learned by trial and error. You know, how did you learn to walk? How many mistakes did it take you? When you were taught the alphabet, just 26 letters, which you can rattle. You know your alphabet to A to Z?
Yeah.
Can you rattle it off?
I do.
Yes,
I can.
Pretty quick, right?
Pretty quick.
How long did it take you to learn those?
Probably a while.
And did you make any mistakes when you
I'm
learned?
sure I did.
Okay, so you learn by trial and error, and then after a while you learn by certain kind of conditioning, like we condition a dog. You know, they say you ring the bell, you know those experiments, and the dog salivates. After a while, you learn because you associate one thing with another.
Right.
So there's a kind of a story. And then as we evolve to higher levels, we develop senses. We all have 5 senses. You know them: hearing, smelling, seeing. And they're kind of limited. They're not all that accurate. And not only that, how far can you see?
Only so far.
You can only, and how far can you hear? And taste, you have to, smell.
Yeah.
It has to be pretty much in the area. So it's limited, but we learn by imitation. So now we have all these ways over the course of time we've learned. And then we talked earlier in the last meeting about this wonderful new thing that happens. We develop a genie organ that can turn something that's physical into something that's non-physical, and all of a sudden we learn conceptual understanding, a whole new world. It's not just things that you can measure, but we have love, we have happiness, we have misery, we have hate. Hate is included in all that. So now we learn that we can use words or symbols that can turn on a different story.
Yeah.
And we said the power of story is, if the story we create is really what determines our life. It's not the event, it's the kind of way we interpret the event. You know, one person interprets something one way. I mean, if you were born in, for example, if you were born in under Hitler's time, to be a Jew or a gypsy was someone you hate.
Right.
If your parents were Jewish or gypsy, you didn't quite have the same feeling.
Exactly.
But the same, situation. So we learn by this magical way of transforming something that's physical into something that's not physical. And when we learn to use symbols, we have our animal brain that's been with us for 1 billion years, and our human brain that's only been just a short while. So we have this child against this mega giant here.
Yeah.
So who's going to be the winner in deciding what's going to be done? So basically our animal brain is going to say, if you're going to have words, you're going to have the words that I want you to have, the words that teach me the power of knowledge. I'm really interested in knowledge. And what does the power of knowledge do? It teaches us to have greater power. So we develop the power of having the ability to be creators. We create all the things that we like, including weapons, but we don't necessarily have wisdom. Wisdom takes a different level. So it's when we learn to learn the higher level of things, and we're not just learning anymore. The magic of our human brain and the genie organ is we can learn to learn.
Okay.
And you understand that distinction between learning and learning to learn? When you learn to learn, you become aware. Not only do you develop a conscious awareness, but you develop self-conscious awareness. It's though when you shave, if you can't see yourself in the mirror, it's a lot harder.
Right.
But once you can see yourself and you have an idea where you're going, it's that direction again. I know where I am, where I'm going. I can predict the future now. So we have the power of self-consciousness. So what's different of us is we can learn to learn, and we are creators. No other life form creates computers and automobiles and not even laughter. We said humans create laughter, and we create happiness. I don't know, our ancestors mostly lived. The animals, they seem to do what they're programmed to do.
Yeah.
Which is, the main thing they're doing is to procreate.
Yeah.
And then
And survival.
Then survive. So all of our older brain is dedicated to getting us through life, telling us what we have to do. And when we say there's something new, they basically say, no, I don't think that's important, just do what I do. So we said, I think I can is the energy factory that turns us on. Okay, so now we understand something about our education. When Epictetus told us the most important thing, and Einstein told us the most important thing is imagination, they also said, Epictetus said, only the educated are free. What a powerful statement. Unless you are educated, your genie organ is a slave to your animal brain. And we're born like animals, we continue to act like animals until we teach ourselves the 7+2 formula, until we teach ourselves the 8 choices we have and we pick the right ones. So we begin to become aware now. You get the picture now how we're becoming enlightened. And part of our history is we weren't getting very much enlightened until maybe sometime around maybe 2,500 years ago. People said maybe there's something to this business about love.
Yeah.
The golden rule. Until that time, it was everything was survival of the fittest.
Right.
My way is the right way, and might is right. And all of a sudden, we had a different way of doing and thinking about things. So we've talked now about the evolution of education. Now I'd like to bring in what I think is even more important. It's the way we evolve the use of our energy.
Okay.
We said the first cell made us different from all inanimate life because the first cell was given an energy factory. From the first cell, every form of life has an energy factory, and that energy factory, that first, is dedicated to survival of the fittest. And when that first cell was interacting with the rest of the world and taking an active role rather than a passive role, like a rock, for example, the story goes, and the interesting story of Narcissus. Narcissus looked in the pond and saw himself, and he fell in love with himself. And And that's called narcissistic love or self-love. Now, we talked about normal and sane, right?
Mm-hmm.
So was it normal if when the first cell divided by mitosis, it was the only cell, was an identical self.
Yeah.
So if I looked in the mirror and I saw myself, why not fall in love with myself?
Why not? Yeah.
It's the beginning of love myself with the abundance that overflows to enrich the world. Perfectly, not only normal, but sane. But as the cell became complicated, now we began to get offspring that are a little bit different. There was differentiation.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have a family. So now what happens next? That individual unit has a family, and you have a family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you just love yourself, or do you have love for your family?
I do love the family.
It's a very important, critical
Exactly,
part, right?
definitely.
So you not only love yourself, now you share your energy,
Right.
and you direct it to loving your family as well. And then what happened afterwards, as we became more complex, the cells began to become more into individual groups, and then we began to have tribes. And now all of a sudden you found yourself part of a tribe. Now, you can identify yourself as a number of tribes, right?
Definitely.
You're an American, you have
Yeah.
maybe a religious tribe, you're a male tribe,
Mm-hmm.
you are certain a business tribe,
Right.
and now you pretty much show allegiance to those tribes.
Yeah.
Now, you learn when you were young to cross your heart and say, I
Pledge allegiance.
pledge my allegiance, even my life even.
Yeah.
So after a while, you learn that's a pretty good thing that you have a love for your tribe, even to the point where you'd be willing to give your life for it.
Yeah.
So now we develop a tribal love. And after that tribal love develops, something very interesting occurs in our evolutionary history. As the cells begin to multiply and divide, we have the two sexes in one species, in one organ. You know, the male and the female part were all together, and now all of a sudden we become male and female. And it'd be hard to procreate if the male and female never got together.
Right.
So if your male and sexual part, female parts were in one organism, you didn't have to have any outside
Right.
influence. But now we've got to come together. So we now have another kind of love that follows narcissistic love and parental love and tribal love. That's called erotic love.
Okay.
You know anything about erotic love? Have you ever had some sense of, she's really hot, babe?
Oh, yeah. Every once in a while.
I really
Yeah.
like to have that person as
Yeah.
my conjugal
Yeah.
partner. Once or twice
Once or
you've seen
twice,
somebody
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
It's kind of built into us.
It is.
So now we've reached that point, and each time we've gone from one level to the next. You see how we progress?
Right.
We have a kind of a story that goes with it.
Okay.
So the first story with when we mitose, and we have an exact opposite, is the story is what works for me for now. The next time when you have a family, you say the story is what works for me and my family. Now, what happens when you get to tribal love? What's good
yeah.
for me, my family,
And the tribe.
and my
Yeah.
tribe. And then when we divide into the different sexes, then you say, what's good for my procreation status? I've got this part of my whole being is based on that I've got to reproduce.
Yeah.
And now that I need a partner. So there's this magnetic attraction.
Yeah.
You know what happens when the opposite poles of a magnet come together?
Yeah.
And you know what happens when the female dog goes in the heat? There's a very strong attraction,
There
isn't
is.
it? Most of the dogs
Very.
don't say, I've got some bones, I want to sniff,
Yeah.
whatever. Before you know it, you see all the dogs are coming
Oh,
in
yeah.
and they're running after what the scent has done. So we have evolved to the point where you can see how these stories, one are added to the other. It's not
Yeah.
just that we've developed a new kind of love. We've added a different kind of love, but now we have developed the need to be part of a tribe, and we have this it's called a meme actually. There's the meaning of a word meme. I had to look it up recently, but a meme is an idea or a viewpoint or a ritual that is so powerful that it can influence a whole culture.
Okay.
For example, as a musician, you know, a song could capture the attention.
Yeah.
One person sings a song and you get 8 million people are singing
All singing it together.
You know, an example of that would be in Nazi Germany. You know, there was an idea that came across a meme of we are the only
Right.
good
Superior
blood,
race or- yeah.
and then a whole millions of people picked that up. So that's what a meme is, and the meme that we developed over these periods of the evolution of love was what's good for me and my family, my tribe. And now what Einstein has been telling us, we've evolved to the point where we can't just identify with our tribe because that says it's either our tribe or their
limited,
tribe,
yeah.
and there will continue to be war. We've got to develop a new meme that says, how can we work together? And what does that mean? What's good for my tribe and your tribe?
Mm-hmm.
How can we use our energy together? And so we now see the interesting of energy, that it leads to the next highest form of love, which we call unconditional love. Or in Christianity, it's, I guess, agape love, or global love. And we're not there yet. You know, it's quite obvious that we talked about our symbols are all directed to tribal love. We've got to make this transition if we're ever going to survive, to teach yourself how do we develop the ability to have unconditional global love. And one of the things that's really hard is, even if you feel unconditional love, what if someone comes and they kill someone that you love, a child or whatever? How would you feel? How would you feel about that person? Would you feel like, I want to forgive that person?
No.
Or would you pretty much feel, send them to the chair?
Yeah.
Or even the worst kind of torture or punishment.
Definitely.
If they've done something so egregious. But the last and the highest form of love, which supposedly only a few people have been able to reach, is called forgiveness. You know, some of the most, I think the most powerful words that were ever spoken were, forgive them, they know not what they do. Think about that. Forgive them, they know not what they do. And we don't practice that, we preach it. We preach his forgiveness. But if you look at the world, not only do we not forgive people, but we don't even have the level before that where we have unconditional love, which means that I want to help that person, because when I'm kind to that person, the likelihood is they're going to be, it makes sense. It's a universal kind of a law that that's what happens. But we've only evolved to the point where we're not complete yet.
Yeah.
And how do we get to that next step? Well, the first 4 steps we were given. We were, as we said, we started off with an energy factory, a need to do something for others, but we haven't been given unconditional, universal love. That's something, as Epictetus said, only the educated are free. So we have to do that by education, and that's where we come back to. We need to teach ourselves these skills and understand them, why they work. And the reason they work is because we've discovered the law of orderliness and predictability.
Yeah.
We know they make common sense. And when we begin to see that people in this tribe and this tribe and that tribe, we all agree that we much prefer happiness and love. We begin to say there's universal qualities.
Yeah.
So, and we're just discovering the importance of these things that you can't measure by putting them on a scale or holding them in your hand. So love and unconditional love and forgiveness, these are things we have to teach.
Right.
And the way we teach them is by telling people you have to do that, or we teach them by our own role model. So when we show kindness, but if I say, it doesn't matter what I do to you, you should be kind to me.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah.
It doesn't work all that well. So we talked about how we've evolved love, how we've evolved education, knowledge, and when we only did what the animal brain did in terms of knowledge, to learn the knowledge of power, is our human brain can learn the power of love. You see the distinction?
Yeah.
The love of power, our animal brain, the power of love, when we get to our ability to think in terms of conceptual understanding. So now we just want to look at the evolution of procreation, the evolution of sex.
Yeah.
Most people are interested in sex. Why is that? It's pretty obvious, because that's the most important thing from the very beginning, was we have to procreate.
Yeah.
And if we don't procreate,
we're done.
It
Yeah.
doesn't matter about the bomb anymore.
Yeah.
If we stop procreating, that's the end. So nature and nurture seem to have been very focused on procreating and sex. If you read the newspapers, you look at television and so on, there's a lot of sex involved, right?
Yeah.
And a lot about what you have to do in order to be attractive
Yeah.
to the other person in order to procreate. So now I've mentioned in our history we started off with one cell that divided by called mitosis.
Mm-hmm.
You create your identical self, and then you begin to have different kinds of offspring, and we go through these different layers of love, and then we get to the point where we have a male on one side and a female over here. Now, tell me what your point of view is are males and females more alike or more different?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, but there's an answer.
I feel like they're more alike.
And what way are they more alike?
Oh man, we're alike in so many different ways, right? We have
How many arms do you have?
these 2 arms,
How
2
many-
legs, 2 eyes, 2 ears.
brain,
We
yeah.
all got a brain.
You eat.
We all have the ability to think
You
and
poop.
eat. Yeah, exactly.
So if you had 2 mannequins,
Mm-hmm.
they look pretty much alike, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we put a red rose on one and a blue rose on the other, what would you notice about them? Would you notice that they each look so much alike? Or do you see the differences? That one's got this a red rose and this one's got a blue.
Right.
So you see, our animal brain can only look in terms of the differences.
Right.
Our human brain has the ability, because of its
Yeah.
ability, to go from either or to both and. We can look at the similarities. And the fact is, we are much more alike
Mhm.
than different. Now, what is the difference when you think about it? When nature separated us into different sexes, who got what? Okay, so what did males get? Males got muscles.
Yeah.
They got the power of muscles. They could run longer. They had more strength. They got, how many sperm a day do you think they make? How many sperm a day do males make?
Probably a lot.
About 20 million a day, would you believe it?
That's a lot.
20 million. Would you believe that someone actually did a study and an elephant's ejaculation is 7 billion sperm?
Oh my goodness.
It's, one elephant sperm could create the whole world.
Oh my goodness.
if we made each one of those sperm work. So here we have a male now who's got physical strength, he's got muscle, and he's got this urge. He's got an organ, which is a penis, which has the end of the tip, which is very sensitive to pleasure. It's called the glans penis, is very richly supplied with something that gives us pleasure. And he's making all these sperm. So does he have a purpose? Can you make it? I mean, if you saw this Ferrari and you saw a horse, do you think they would have different purposes? Or you saw a bulldozer and you saw do they have different purposes?
Yeah.
When you see that we talked about the Swiss watch, does it have some kind of a purpose behind it? So when you look at the male, here he does. We've mentioned these characters. Now, what is the female characteristics? She has how many eggs in a month or in a day? She makes 1 egg in 30 days.
Yeah.
How's that compare to 20 million a day?
A day. Right.
Okay, so does that say anything? And what is it about the female that's different? She has the ability to carry a newborn.
Right.
In the case of the human being, it's for 9 months. The male is not concerned about what happens after he delivers the sperm, is he?
No.
He's off to
He's
look.
done.
He's
Yeah.
look for the next female.
Yeah.
You know, he's got all these sperm he's got to get rid of. Johnny Appleseed, so to speak. That's the way we are. But the female, she has a very different perspective on life. Once she takes one of these sperm and conceives, she's got a job ahead of her for at least 9 months
Yeah.
and much longer. So she's not so much designed for power, but she is designed for something else. And we call that nurturance. Another word would be love, unconditional love. So when the sexes were divided, the males were given certain things, the females another, but actually we're more alike than not, aren't we?
Right. Yeah.
So in our language, we get back to, we talked about the importance of language. So we divide them, we say this person with sperm is a male and this person with a uterus is a female. But when we really think about it, a more appropriate word would be, this is a he, she, and this is a she, he.
Okay.
You get the idea?
Yeah.
We're both more alike, much more than we are different. And instead of saying words that show how different we are, we'd be much more accurate if we said he's more masculine characteristic, but he also has the feminine hormones.
Yeah.
So we all have masculine and feminine hormones, but the male has more androgen, the female has more estrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we get to our language. You would be better known as a he, she, and my wife, in my case, would be a she, he, because she's more in the other direction. So our language, again, gets us caught up into this, putting us in the either or directions. So now we looked at the the evolution of education, of sex, and of love.
Mm-hmm.
And all these tell us something, that we're evolving to this next level of beyond our initial memes that said love ourself, love ourself and our family, love ourself, our family, and our tribe, and also look for our other mate. Unless we can go up to this next level of universal love, where we can say, I love, even if the person is of a different religion or a different ethnic background, unless we can learn to develop a new meme which says, how can we work together instead of my way is the only way, survival of the fittest. Now we begin to see the importance of education. And if we understand that, we're much more likely to change our behavior.
Right.
Than if we just go on with this idea that has been so much a part of our animal brain. It's either my way is the right way.
So as we talk about this evolution, I guess the big overarching question is, who are we and what is our purpose?
That's the question that we all ask ourselves, the key question. If we understand who we are and we understand our purpose and our possibilities, we're much more likely to evolve. We're much more likely to continue to grow by choice instead of by chance.
Right.
By common sense, by wisdom, instead of by who has the most power, who has the biggest bomb.
Yeah.
That's a very critical question in today's life. So what we learn is that we're not human beings. We're not a static creature. Mm-hmm. We learn that we are the work or the creation of something very powerful that we don't understand.
Yeah.
Our vision, we'd like to see who that is, but our vision can only see so far. And when we developed imagination, Darwin could use his imagination and the law of orderliness and predictability to see as far as the first cell. We could see now 3.5 billion years in the future. Now we're venturing into the beginning of our Earth, of 14 billion. We're getting further back, but we're still very far to that first cause. You know, as the further out we go, it's an interesting thought, but the fact that we have imagination allows us to see, even the blind person to see further than the person who has good eyes. If you think about that, we can see well into the distance with our ability to use imagination than even with our eyes. A blind person can understand something about the future. Yeah. And it's such a marvelous opportunity we have.
So why do we have war?
Well, if we go back to our ancestors lived on separate hills, and when they separated into one tribe on one hill, one on the other hill, there wasn't enough food. You had to be part of a tribe, and then if there was only enough food in between for one tribe to survive, what's the way you deal with things? You have to kill the other tribe before they get there, or else fight them off. And so our history has been a series of one war after the other because of one tribe wanting to compete for limited resources.
Yeah.
I've recently read something about in evolution that there are two classes of monkeys. The more common class live in areas where the food is scarce, and in those areas, when the dominant male comes and he takes over another tribe, he kills off all the others, and has his own progeny. They have to deal with the other tribe because the dominant male, the strongest, they end up in war. They fight, and there's a winner and a loser. There's a group of monkeys called the bonobo. I think it's bonobo monkeys.
Okay.
A group that live where there's plenty of vegetation. There's no limitation of food, so there's no scarcity. So when they find another tribe, instead of fighting, they engage in sex. Sounds like a better alternative, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Now, I don't know how accurate. I mean, that's been described, but it seems like when we have scarcity, which is the big issue we have, the big question, the big puzzle is, why do we fill our world with fear, hate, scarcity, and war, when what we really want is happiness, enough, love, and peace?
Right.
And part of the answer is to your question, because we have scarcity. And if we don't have any better way, we have to deal with it by going to war, being stronger, having more powerful weapons. So we keep evolving to the point of making more powerful weapons. But now the reality is, and this is what I think is one of the critical issues, we have the ability to make enough food.
Right.
We know how to make enough corn for everybody. We know how to make enough chickens that people can eat. We know how to make pure water. And the other important thing is we know how to limit our population. We have birth control. You know, we can tell people you can't have 12 children that you don't have the ability to support, and then cry that why don't we have enough food? And then say, if you have food and we don't, we're going to kill you because you have food and we don't.
Yeah.
And then we have some people, as part of our natural history of wanting power, that have, one of the issues today is, why is that 2 or 3% of our population have most of the wealth, and there are people that are starving? You know, what's going to happen if you imagine it, just imagine that island we had, this primitive island before, if you have a few people who have all the wealth and the other people are starving. How long are they going to live in peace?
Not very long.
And our history has been a series of wars between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
And those who have either, and of course your ideology becomes a powerful force as well. If you can get a bigger tribe following you, then you also have a greater power or wealth.
So is war ever constructive?
Yes, as a matter of fact, war historically has been the cause of peace. It sounds like a contradiction.
It does, it does.
It sounds like a contradiction, but when you have a conflict between two tribes and they're fighting and they're disagreeing, when one tribe shows their superiority, the others either are wiped out, they're no longer, or they become part, they give up whatever they are.
There's got to be a
They
resolution.
be part of the bigger tribe, and for a while we have peace. And that's been our history. You have a war followed by peace, and then you have another war. So they say crises drives evolution. So usually the group that wins is because they have a little better knowledge. They have better technology. Instead of fighting with weapons that aren't as powerful, they have more weapons.
Yeah.
You imagine if somebody, what happened in World War II, we showed that we had a bomb that could destroy pretty much everything quickly.
Yeah.
That brought it to a surrender. It didn't happen right away, by the way. We had to drop a second bomb before people were able to realize that this is more than we can really deal with. So we're creatures of habit, and when we have a crisis, which is a lot of pain for everybody, when you have a war, people on both sides die.
Right.
It's not what either side wants, but it ends up that this is a way we could solve problems. The message of this whole meeting that we're having about the need for educating ourselves is that we've come to a point in our evolution where we now have the ability to feed everybody if we can limit our population. We know how to do both. But but we're still caught up in this idea of tribal love. What's good for my tribe for here and now? We're still based on fight or flight, pain or pleasure. Whereas the higher goals that we're aiming for, what is our purpose? Our purpose is to become more aware of the law of orderliness and predictability. That's the law that was created for us by the first cause, the uncaused cause. He said there's a meaning to everything. And that first cell, which we begin to look at, said, was given this message that when you become more complex, your job is to take care of the larger system. Now, well, I mentioned the story of the Swiss watch, right? Think about our human body. If we have 30 trillion cells and we have multiple organs, every one of these bodies of 30 million trillion cells and various organs is all built on the basis of a single cell. Mm-hmm. It starts with a one cell. And if that one cell directs its energy for the benefit of the larger system, what happens? We have a healthy whole system, don't we? Mm. So the reason that we survive is because we cooperate.
Right.
Every cell has to cooperate. And when a cell doesn't, it becomes what we call a cancer cell. What is a cancer cell? A cancer cell takes,
right,
but it doesn't give. And then if it takes and doesn't give, eventually the whole organism dies. And then the cancer cell has to die too, because it can't get its nutrition. So we can just look at a situation here. We can learn a great deal of it. If we try to take the body apart and say, like the centipede story, we try to understand everything.
Yeah.
We lose our understanding now.
Yeah.
But if we realize that just looking at this magnificent system and how it all works together, we realize that part of our mission is to contribute something of meaning to the larger system.
So how do we, as we're watching, recognize when we're becoming our own person?
There are signs, there are ways, and I've created a whole list of the kinds of things. For example, when we can say, I am responsible for myself, mm-hmm. rather than a friend is someone I can use to do something for me.
Right.
You see, that would be an idea. When you can say, when I'm kind to other people, I realize people are kind to me. And there's a whole list of these things, and I've actually created that, and we're going to ask you to put it on our educational website, so that people can go through this. If I can just slip down to that for a minute.
Yep.
You see, there's 2 pages here of ways that we can compare one to the other. For example, love is love. I am a love junkie. I depend on others to fulfill my requirements for love and approval. I am upset when other people need love from me and I don't get it. That's the animal brain way of thinking.
Yeah.
The human brain, or the genie organ, says, I create and maintain my love-making factory. I've got this love-making factory. I generate love to fill my own needs, and I have excess that spills over for other people. And you see, now that's the modern version of the golden rule.
Yeah.
We go down to any one of these other. Power is wisdom. I know what is good and right, and those are the powerful tools that make the rules. Might makes right, as opposed to the other point of that is a fulfilled life requires self-direction, the pursuit of wisdom, and lifetime goals I can learn from others. That's a different way of understanding. So we can go down and make a long list of these things, and it doesn't take very long to begin to spot where am I standing right now. And if we did that honestly, and it's hard to do it honestly because we deceive ourselves all the time, we would say, yes, I am pretty much following that basic meme, what's good for me, my family, and my tribe for here and now. And if I really wanted to get to the other side where we cooperate, I really need to have a different kind of way of thinking. What's good for my tribe and your tribe? What's good for you and me? So let's learn to work together instead of using our powers to kill one another.
Yeah, very powerful. And again, we have all of these documents for you in the members area, so make sure that you download them and go through them. And Don, as we start to wrap up here in this lesson, do you have any other additional stories to share with us that might bring this all together?
There are a couple of things I'd like to share because I think they're important, and we'll get them. They'll be available in the books, and
definitely.
By the way, all of the content on the Educational Community website is forever free. No one will ever be required to pay money. They can come to our websites and everything they can get, and they not only can they get it, they can give it to other people as
share
gifts.
it.
You can,
exactly.
I mean, there's 4 books. There are 4 books on there, and if they like them, they can pass them on like a gift to somebody else. Just by a click on their computer, and everything is public domain. So that's the idea. I mean, think about it. If one person developed a gene that could prolong life, should they be able to charge everybody else in order to get that gene, or should that become public information? Should we all have that ability?
We should all have that
So,
opportunity.
I mean, when we develop something worthwhile, we find these universal wisdoms. We really need to make them public for everybody to learn. I'd like to tell one of my favorite stories. I call it the coin flip story.
Okay.
Just like the Grasshopper Joe story. The coin flip story is, it tells the difference between the animal brain and the human brain. When we take a coin, we flip it up in the air. I don't know if I have a coin that I can use. I thought I'd maybe brought something, but just you can use your imagination. That's the wonderful thing about imagination. Like here's the coin flip. Can you imagine? And when it comes down, I look at it, and it's either heads or tails. Head or tail. It's one or the other. It's either or. Our animal brain can only see the world in terms of me or you, us or them, what's good or bad, what's right or wrong, your religion or my religion.
Right.
What the human brain can do with its imagination, it can pick up this coin and put it between our thumb and forefinger. And it can hold it up, and it can see there's a head on one side and a tail on the other side. And that's only the superficial outside. There's something thicker than the outside where that connects them together. So now we see that it's not a heads and a tail, but it's a heads or a tail. Our world is a heads and a tail. Now think about this. This is a difficult for you to grasp, but if you think about it, you'll find it so. When we love somebody, we create an equal amount of hate for someone.
Okay.
When we love somebody, we want to be with them. We want to devote our energy for them. What happens when the person betrays us and they do something we don't like? Then we begin to hate what they do.
Right.
So when we create 3 units of love for someone, we have the potential for 3 units of hate. What happens when a marriage falls apart?
Becomes hateful.
You want to find the killer attorney. I want to kill the bastard, what he did to me. Right? So think about it. When you move up 3 steps, you create 3 levels of going down, right? You move to the left 3 levels. So our human brain can see that the world is both and. It's not either or. That these 2 sides are connected. And because our animal brain has been dominant for so long, we see the world and perceive it. So I think this is a little good example when we want to decide who wins the coin flip, who's right, who's wrong, who gets the kickoff, and so on. We use that because our animal brain is blind to the fact that there's as much heads as there are much tails. There's much when you go above, there's as much more to come down. So that's where we are connected. We are one in so many ways, but we're only different in a small number of ways. And that's what we need to teach ourselves, that we are one, we're connected. And a lot of people are waking up to that now. There are individuals saying this. One of my favorite people is Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote the Conversations with God series. He spent a lot of his time pointing out some of the lack of common sense in some of our ways of thinking. And his conclusion was that our purpose in life is really to serve others. It's that first cell was designed to serve itself and then to serve the family. And if we realize that, in order to survive, we have to not just say, what can we take from others? And greed is something
Yeah.
we're familiar, but what can we give to others?
Exactly.
You've heard the expression, what goes around comes around?
Yep.
So when we give something, we get it back. There's one other thing I want to share with you. We talked about the importance of stories. And there's a little formula that I would like people to be aware of.
Okay.
That what my favorite professor came up with, but others have used. It started off, I think, with a therapist by the name of Albert Ellis, who said that we can understand ourselves by a simple, what he called the ABC formula.
Okay.
And you can put that up on the screen. You can find it here. If you'll go back, you'll see where it's. The ABC formula is we have an activating event, something that an awareness, an activating event, and then we have a belief system, and then we have a consequence. It's called the ABC formula that Albert Ellis came up with. Later, Jack Canfield came up with one of his most basic or fundamental truths or values. His formula was E plus R equals O. An event happens, and that event leads to a response,
Right.
and that leads to an outcome.
Right.
And what Epictetus told us is that it's not the activating event, or it's not the
Right. The actual thing.
The
yeah.
actual thing. It's the belief that we have about
Right.
it that leads to the consequences. And what my professor came up with was what he called what I call the 3A formula. We have an awareness. If something happens on the other side of the world, we don't know about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference to us. But when we have an awareness, that leads to an assumption. And that assumption is our story or our meme. So whenever we have an awareness, self-awareness, we create a story about it. And that story, depending on the story we make, is very critical. And that story then leads to an outcome, an action.
Yeah.
So it's a awareness, self-awareness, and then assumption, and then an action.
Yeah.
So if we want to change the outcome, our actions, what we do is we change our story, our assumption. Then Jack Canfield, we change our response. And in the earlier form was we change our belief. But they're all basically saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I happen to think that the AAA is a little more accurate because unless we're aware of something, we become aware of something,
Yeah.
we don't care if something happens on the other side of the world.
Right.
One of the things that Jerry Frank mentioned in his book on sanity and survival, he said he lives in Baltimore, and on one side of him is Edgewood Arsenal, and the other side is let's see, what was it? Edgewood Arsenal, and there was another plant that made enough gases to kill everybody in the world. Another made enough biological weapons when they were all felt permissible for warfare. And he made the point that, he's totally unaware of these things because he lives in Baltimore. He can't smell the gas. He doesn't know these biological chemicals. But something is going on that could kill everyone instantly if there was a leak of these things. So unless we're aware of something, we don't do anything about it. If I'm aware that you do something, you're a friend of mine, or my spouse does something, I may really hate that, and then I get into a confrontation. Somebody around the other side of the world, I don't know them.
Yeah.
I don't have any feelings about them.
Yeah, exactly.
But the issue is, whenever we love somebody, we also create that possibility of hating as well. So they're connected. So I think that's important that we try to realize.
We've raised, what I like about this program is we've raised a lot of people's awareness of what's going on out there, what the possibilities are, and what they can do about it. And when we come back in the next lesson, we're actually going to talk about some ways that they can get more involved.
Unless we take action.
Exactly. Unless we do something about what we're learning. Because this is,
We can know what's reasonable. We don't have to understand why it happens.
Yeah.
But I've given you 7 simple words that anyone can learn. I've given you some other things that will make them more permanent. You don't have to know a lot. You can learn these things very quickly.
Yeah.
Even if you don't need to understand that there's wiring behind the light switch.
Yeah.
It makes it work. All you have to do is, you one light, you flip that switch.
Yep.
And now we have 7 word switches.
Exactly.
We talked about that one switch that gets the train moving to a different direction. It's so simple. If we can only get to work together and wake up people, and it's so easy to do, that's our mission here.
That is. So we're going to put it all together. We're going to help you take action and how you can get involved in helping to create world peace. Thank you guys so much for watching this lesson, and we'll see you in the next one.